That's gotta be Biderman.
Look who's back.
Well, I'll be there.
It's like the night after WrestleMania 14 when X-Pac came back to form the new DX.
Yeah, it's just like
What's
that.
up? What's up, guys? How are you?
That's gotta be Biderman.
Chris Biderman is back.
Yeah, he's in the house.
I
My
like
co-host,
this.
of course, at Candlestick Chronicles. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're also
Please
on
do.
YouTube.
Great podcast.
Search Candlestick Chronicles and subscribe to the channel. Anyways,
Well, this made me happy.
Well, I don't know. They're asking questions.
What the hell are you talking about? What are you doing with him?
I'm not sure.
yeah. So this is
You guys
my
don't know what
surprise.
none of
I
these
guess I
drops
need to point
mean?
this way.
No, you guys don't know what any of those drops means. That's what makes it funnier.
Yeah, it's just wrestling and stuff,
No,
you know.
it's good. That's right. Yep. That's
So, anyways, this is Chris Biderman's music.
I like that.
Thanks.
Yeah, we missed you, man.
What's up, big dog?
I've missed coming on, man. It's been far too long. I always enjoy seeing you guys at Kings games. Obviously, I see and talk to Kyle a ton, but to get back on the air with you guys, it's always awesome, man.
Yeah,
you guys are like my foray into
months.
Sacramento.
I see this guy at G Unit concerts. that's where I see Chris Biderman.
That's true.
Let's just I mean, you know what? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Chris, why do you want to trade Domas Sabonis?
Oh,
Hey,
Man,
oh.
I've never said I want to trade Domantas Sabonis. That is not been the
you're right.
discussion
Come on,
point.
Kyle. Grow up. Let's do this the right way.
Grow
Chris, why do you hate DeMontis Sabonis?
That's a better question.
Okay. No, so I like Domantas Sabonis. He's obviously a great player. The numbers he's putting up, historic, right? The question I would have, and man, you guys are really throwing me to the fire on this. I'm really going to ingratiate myself with the audience.
Chris,
the question I would have.
I'm going back to 1140. This is way easier.
The fan.
No, man. So the question I would have is, are you going to feel good long term about paying Domantas Sabonis $40 million a year? That's the only question I would have. And I don't know the answer necessarily, but I look at the list of dudes making, 35, 40, $45 million a year, the max guys. Just about all those dudes are guys that, 10 seconds left in the game, you're down by one, you're trying to get a bucket from that guy. And Domantas Sabonis, as good as he is offensively and what he does for you rebounding and all of those things, just hasn't proven to be a bucket getter. And maybe he can turn into one. But my question would be, is paying a max guy who's really exceptional on one end of the floor and less exceptional on the other end of the floor, is that going to hurt you long term? That's all. I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying I want to trade him. I'm not saying signing him to that contract was a bad idea. I'm just saying, if you look at what happened in the playoffs last year, if he's not going to play substantially better in the playoffs this year, like they need him to, then $40 million a year for that guy is a little bit questionable. But thanks, Kyle.
So
really appreciate you
welcome.
starting me off this way.
No, so here's the thing with that. He has to have the opportunity to fail in the playoffs. It's like he's not being afforded the opportunity to fail. And then I'd make a comp. And Jesse, if you could jump in on this, is Jalen a fair comp to this? Because Jalen obviously can get a bucket, but in the final seconds of a Pistons game, or excuse me, in the final seconds of a Celtics game, you're going to Tatum.
Yeah, you're going to Tatum more times than not.
It's no different than in Sacramento. Like, De'Aaron's going to have the ball and he's going to control everything. If he sees a world where Domas has a shot right there, he'll make sure Domas gets it. Domas isn't going to take the ball and create the final basket. De'Aaron's going to do that. I don't think that's terribly uncommon.
No, it's not. But if he's he's going to have opportunities from 18 feet where teams are going to gap him and just play all of the Kings shooters and leave him wide open for a jumper. And is he going to be confident in the big moment to take it and make it?
That's my question. That's the question I have too.
And again, this is I'm not saying he's incapable or that he won't do it, but that's just my question after watching the playoffs last year.
I really feel like the playoffs are overblown. Like what
I know.
the way he played in the playoffs.
We're
was,
alone.
Was really overblown. I'm not saying it was great, but People talk about that like he averaged 4 points a game, 4 rebounds. The guy had a better playoffs than Bam Adebayo, and not one person will say anything like that about Bam, who's probably going to make $40 million a year as well. But nobody will talk about Bam this way.
I mean,
I don't talk about the Heat. I don't follow the Heat and watch the Heat.
Well, I mean, the people who do won't talk about Bam this way.
And you know who else they won't do it with? You going to Siakam at the end of a game? Because Siakam's about to get a bag from Indiana.
That's probably a mistake.
But these are also, I mean, Bam especially. I don't know so much about Siakam, but you're talking about elite defensive players.
I mean,
like at least.
I mean, all right,
I thought we were going to talk Niners, man. I didn't want to come on
My
here
bad.
and have this bonus conversation.
Hey, 3rd and 4, Kenny.
Trying to bum everyone out with my.
I'll be completely honest. I had forgotten about Chris Biderman's hate for Domantas Sabonis. I completely forgot until Kyle brought it back.
But I do not hate Domas. I don't hate Domas. I don't want that to be a thing.
Is Domas an elite offensive player?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we talking about? Bam is not an elite offensive player. He's an elite defensive player. Sabonis is not an elite defense player. He's an elite offensive player.
I think if you had Domas by himself, it would be problematic. Yes. But you don't.
Right.
You have De'Aaron. He's part of a duo, and that makes it special.
And the thing is we'll have a lot more information when the Kings play in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have to try to pretend like we know the answer right now because whether we're overblowing or whether I'm overblowing how he played in the Warriors series or not, the sample size is going to grow and we're going to have a better idea of how this goes.
No, like we're having fun, man, but it's okay Chris Biderman is a broadcast journalist.
Absolutely.
He's asking questions. And that's what you did in Denver, Chris. Let's look at, because you were I think the only person on the road trip these last couple of games. I'll freely admit I was frustrated after the Phoenix game. And I felt probably a little bit better than I should after the Denver game. But what was your takeaway from those quick 1-2 games that had two completely different reactions in Sacramento, and I'm assuming on the road where you were?
Yeah, I'll be honest. When the first quarter was happening in Denver, I thought this might be ugly. This might be a blowout because like being around the team a little bit. It was very clear that they needed the All-Star break. Like those dudes are worn out. And one thing I think that's probably a little bit underrated when talking about the Kings and maybe some of their inconsistencies, the Kings deal with inconsistencies, but their stars also play every game, right? So it's not a scenario where like, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are getting back-to-backs off. Or getting a game off every 8 to 10 games, right? No, they're playing every game when they're healthy, and so instead of those days where they're sitting on the bench, they might have a bad game on the floor, and it stands out in a way that's a little bit different from other teams who are resting their stars, right? So it was very clear that this team needed the All-Star break. They've played a ton of road games lately. They had the 5-game trip, and then they had the 7-game trip, and then they go into the break with a 3-game trip, all against Western Conference playoff teams. And that's not an excuse because every team in the NBA has tough portions of the schedule. But my takeaway was the Denver win was super impressive, given that we've seen this team kind of, I don't want to say pack it in, but just like, especially on the back end of back-to-backs, like you think about the Cleveland game at the end of the previous road trip, right? Like, maybe it's just time to like rest up, recharge the batteries. Like, let's go into the second half and build some momentum. And instead it was like De'Aaron Fox looking at Denver as kind of a wounded bird, missing Jamal Murray and KCP, and just being like, no, I'm going to go win this game. Like I'm kind of fed up with losing like the way they did in Phoenix and losing in OKC and not being able to close some games that they definitely should have closed early on in the year. So it was super impressive. And, frankly, like I thought, as impressive as it was for De'Aaron Fox, I think one of the things this year, it's like the scoring in the fourth quarter hasn't been quite the same. So to get that scoring in a big spot from Fox, I think is big. And you could just tell talking to the dudes afterwards in the locker room, like that win really meant a lot to them because not only is it another win against a contending team in the West, but just it changes the entire vibe going into the All-Star break, because if they lost that game, then it's 3 straight losses against Western Conference playoff teams, and you have a week to stew on it. You're probably thinking more about the ending of the Phoenix game if you have a week to stew on a loss to Denver, right? You have more time to think about the OKC game, whereas it's it changes the vibes completely. Be like, all right, we beat the defending champs the last 2 times we played them, including on their home floor on the second night of a back-to-back at elevation, all of that stuff you talk about. So it was super encouraging from that standpoint, because, I woke up in Denver Wednesday morning being like, yeah, this game's probably not going to be all that fun to watch. And it wasn't fun to watch from an aesthetic standpoint, but it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch them respond the way they did. I was super impressed by that. And that type of like mental fortitude, that's what it's going to take for them to elevate themselves among the other Western Conference teams. Because right now, like, you look at their season as a whole and those inconsistencies, that's kind of been their issue. It's been like, why isn't it like this every night? And to come back, win a game that's ugly, not a game that's 145 to 140, but like a game where both teams are shooting below 40%, to win an ugly game like that, I think is something they really needed. And now they have the All-Star break to feel a lot better about themselves than they would have if they went in with a 3-game losing streak.
Chris, we heard all the reports after the game of music blaring in the locker room, and you just talked about how they felt really good about getting that win in Denver. You've been with this team an awful lot, in the first half of the season and even throughout these road trips. What's the vibe you get from them as far as their closeness and togetherness and being in this all together? Is it the same as last year? Is it a little different of a vibe, or are they still through all of this saying, hey, we're sticking together, regardless of what D'Lo and KC are saying or anybody else, we're sticking together, and we're going to figure this out together?
I think the vibes are generally pretty good. Like, I think not making a move at the trade deadline, like that was really the impetus behind that, was like, we like what we got and we don't want to make a change and throw a new personality into the mix just to do it. Right.
Mhm.
Because it feels like when you look at some of the guys that were moved, and I know a lot of Kings fans are looking at, Royce O'Neal types and sort of fringe rotation players, like, oh, they really could have used an upgrade. Like, they like the guys they have, and they expect Kevin Huerter to be better in the second half and potentially in the playoffs than he was throughout, the majority of the first half of the season. They expect more of, what they've gotten from the last month from Harrison Barnes than what they got in the previous 2 months. They expect De'Aaron Fox to be closer to the player he was last year. That's going to go get you a game that you probably don't deserve to win, but his individual brilliance is just going to stand out in the last 2 minutes of a game, like they got in Denver. So, like, I think the vibes are ultimately good. I think they are a close-knit team. I think they're still banking on Keegan Murray to take another step, and he's been banged up, and with Keegan, it's been kind of like adjusting to a new role, adjusting to, more responsibility within the offense, adjusting to, guarding the other team's best perimeter defender a lot of the year, right? Like, so he's still adjusting to that increased workload on both sides. And I think that might be, the reason for his inconsistencies a little bit. And Mike Brown mentioned that Keegan's pretty banged up after the Denver game too. And he definitely needs the time off. So the vibes overall seem good, but what's different overall, like from last year, is last year it was new. So, like, the vibes are never going to be as good as they are in the first year when you break through and you end the playoff drought. And there's more of like a business like attitude, knowing that, like, yeah, like, these regular season wins are cool, but it doesn't matter if we don't win in the playoffs. Where last year this is all new. We have a new coaching staff, a lot of new guys. We break through, we bust that seal, and we get to the playoffs. Like, the season's ultimately a success. But now it's like, all right, we really want to be contenders, and we gotta win at least one round in the playoffs. And we know that, what happens on a random Tuesday or Wednesday during the regular season means much less than what it does once a game start to count in the playoffs.
When you talk about vibes being better, let's kill the vibes, Kyle, and shift gears, because obviously, Chris, we're thrilled to have you back. You cover the Sacramento Kings on a daily for the Sacramento Bee, so we'll get to talk to you a lot moving forward about the Sacramento Kings. But we got to close the door on the NFL season, and I want to be able to do that with you two here. So, Kyle, let's start with your guys' reaction to the firing of Steve Wilkes. I think we found the reaction to that firing very odd. But you guys cover this team as closely as my partner does, and as anyone I know. So your reaction when the 49ers moved on from Steve Wilkes.
It felt like this started in week 7 with that game against Minnesota when Kyle Shanahan kind of threw the defensive coordinator under the bus for that 0 blitz call at the end of the first half. And then there was the effort stuff going into the break. They talked about the defensive effort just wasn't the same, and they got blown out by the Bengals at home. And then you had the whole Steve Wilkes moving down to the sideline thing. It just never felt like that relationship quite gelled. And I think the Niners knew they were taking a little bit of a risk hiring a guy whose foundation is in the secondary. Excuse me. But I think they were expecting that to kind of mesh because Steve Wilkes is such a good coach and he is such a good leader, and players tend to like him very much, that I think they thought there was enough in the good column there that it would overcome any hiccups there were with trying to marry whatever he wanted to do scheme wise with what the 49ers were doing scheme wise. And it just didn't quite take the way they thought it would. And that was why he was let go. I think all the stuff that he got scapegoated for the Super Bowl is wrong. I don't think that's what happened at all.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it just never fit, right? It's not about Steve Wilkes being a good defensive coordinator or not. I think it was mostly about fit. And, one thing that you saw from the 49ers defense, in 2019 and throughout their other years of contention with other coordinators, effort was never an issue. If anything, it was like they're overrunning plays and they're not being sound in their gaps, and they're, missing tackles in the open field because they're being too aggressive, or Talanoa Hufanga is looking in the backfield trying to make a play on the quarterback and letting somebody run free behind them for a big play, right? Like those were the issues that the Niners defenses had previously. And to see them, to have them talking about not giving enough effort in the NFC Championship game,
that's crazy.
To me was a huge red flag. And we had talked about, to Kyle's point, Steve Wilkes' job security all the way back in the middle of the season. So it wasn't entirely anything new. I think, I don't know, I'd have to do like a deep dive on this, but like throughout the NFL, it's not often you hire a coach to run a scheme and not really run his own scheme, right? Like they brought in Steve Wilkes under the guise of, you're going to run this scheme that we've been running and you're going to put your own spin on it. But this is going to be largely the scheme that we've been running the last 2 years because this is what we've drafted players to do. This is what they're comfortable doing. And you're going to adjust to us. It's not going to be a scenario where you have carte blanche to implement anything you want. Right. So that was a little bit weird for sure, given that Steve Wilkes hadn't run that particular scheme before. And so I'm fully expecting Kyle Shanahan to go back to, whether, I don't know, I don't think it'll be Pete Carroll, but I wouldn't surprise me at all if it was somebody who, used to work on that Seattle Seahawks defensive staff, right? Whether it's Marquand Manuel, who Kyle Shanahan's familiar with from their time together in Atlanta, and Manuel worked on the Seahawks staff in 2012, 2013, I believe. And he's currently with Robert Saleh, the 49ers former DC, who's now the head coach of the Jets. So to me, somebody like that makes sense because for Shanahan, he's always wanted to run that scheme, with the exception of when he kicked the tires on Vic Fangio being DC a couple years ago when he was available. And that makes you wonder, like, okay, would he be open to somebody like Brandon Staley, who's a Vic Fangio disciple, who had, the best defense in the league in 2020 when he was with the Rams? That's certainly a question that I'm sure the 49ers are asking themselves. I think given Kyle Shanahan's track record, he's more inclined to hire like an up and coming position coach who will be a coordinator for the first time, or somebody who's not like a head coach, a former head coach, and now coming back to be a DC. Like Bill Belichick, you could definitely make the case for it, but it would surprise me. Same as Pete Carroll. Like Pete Carroll would make sense. You could absolutely sell it, but it would surprise me. But that's why I think somebody like Marquand Manuel or somebody like, Kyle's written on NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today sports media group a few
Howdy,
times. Some candidates, and I think it makes sense. But overall, like for the idea that it's like the Niners are firing Steve Wilkes because they lost the Super Bowl, to me, I think that's missing the forest for the trees. There were issues going back to midway through the regular season.
Everything that you guys just said is completely spot on. There was one point I wanted to make that, just aware of something. But before I do that, isn't Vic himself available? Didn't the Dolphins?
No, he's with the Eagles.
Oh, he went to the Eagles. That's right. That's right. So before, at the beginning of the show, I got turned all the way up because I saw a clip from the Super Bowl of Trent Williams. Basically, he's mic'd up, 4th and 1 play, and he's like, "Hey, watch the QB keep, watch the QB keep," or whatever. I've said it a number of different times. I'm not the only one. We all knew Mahomes was not putting his season in the hands of Pacheco on 4th and 1. Like, it wasn't happening. They don't do a tush
Out of the
push.
shotgun, no chance.
Out of the shotgun. They don't do the tush push. They don't do QB sneaks with him. He was in the shotgun. There was only one outcome that was going to be in that play, and that's Mahomes keeping the ball. And everybody knew it. Trent Williams says, "Alert the QB keep," all this other stuff. And maybe I'm making something out of nothing. Maybe I'm making completely something out of nothing. You know where I saw that clip at? You know who posted that clip? Fred Warner's podcast page.
Well, Fred Warner was also the one that I always point to when they were talking about the booth and the field. Fred was the one. Yeah, you could feel it like immediately when he moved to the field. It was just different. The energy was different. You could communicate different. Like, it was so much better. Yeah, I'd put stock in that.
The Warner House podcast is what it is. And it's not like, see, this guy didn't know what he's doing. It was just, it's like if Inside the NFL put it out there, like,
yeah,
hey, look at Trent Williams. Even he, alerted QB keep, like, watch more on Inside. It's not nothing like outwardly nefarious, but if I'm Fred Warner and Steve Wilkes is my guy, that's not on my podcast page.
It's just putting all the pieces together. Right. That's all it is.
There was also Nick Bosa saying something to the effect of, they ran plays we weren't really prepared for.
And in the chat, so Roddy says, so that's on Wilkes. I've already said a number of different times, like, Nick Bosa should know that as a player. Like, if I know that, like, use your senses or whatever the case may be. But you also have a coach. And if I'm the coach, I'm not only am I saying that if I'm Nick Bosa, I'm saying that if I'm the coach. Hey, guys, Mahomes ain't passing. He's not handing off. Or excuse me, he's not handing it off. Play him. Yes, that's on Wilkes as well. So yeah, I'm not even saying Fred Warner doesn't like Wilkes or anything else. Like, you can have somebody be your coach, like him as a man and like him, but not agree with how he, went about calling plays. And that just kind of stood out to me that's where I saw that clip from.
Yeah. Players have to make plays in that spot. And we talked about it on our post-game podcast. Like, if you're Nick Bosa in that spot, I understand that you're going, yeah, I'm going to crash down. I'm going to try and stop this guy from getting a yard. But also, like, that awareness, like you said, Casey, knowing that, hey, Patrick Mahomes is not putting his career, not career, but his like legacy in the hands of Isaiah Pacheco here. Like, that's not. So I think it's definitely not, oh yeah, that's Steve Wilkes' fault or that's Nick Bosa's fault. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit on both of them for sure.
Chris, we are thrilled that you are back with us, man. We've got big plans for Chris Biderman here at ESPN 1320. We missed you this season. But we're glad that you're back home, and I'm sorry your best friend, the man you served in this man's wedding, and he brings you onto the show and just rolls the semi over you 10 seconds into the show. Well, that's a hell of a heel turn by Kyle Madsen on Chris Biderman, right through the barbershop window to keep the wrestling references going. But we're back.
Yeah, I'll run the bus over myself. I'm like KD joining the super team. I feel like
I'm with it. Hey, that's all right. That's all right. I'm with it.